Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's edition of the CMI 75th Anniversary Leading Lights interview series. I'm Ann Francke, the Chief Executive of CMI, and today I'm really delighted to welcome CMI companion Byron Dixon OBE. He is the CEO and founder of Microfresh, a very successful business based in Leicester. He's also a fellow member with me on the Chancellor's Advisory Council for the Help to Grow Management Scheme. And he sits on the CMI Board of Companions. Welcome, Byron. Delighted to have you here.
Hey, Anne, good to see you. And yeah, pleasure to be part of this event.
Great, thank you. Well, let's get started. I'd like to get your views. Do you think, or how important do you think culture and ethics are in modern professional management and leadership? What role do you think they play? And assuming you think they do play a role, how do you exemplify them?
Wow, that's a big question to kick off.
It is.
There's a lot of good words in there. And I think business has changed. It's changed from pre-COVID. It's changed in the last 15 years. It's changed in the last 30 years. The old days of doing business was go out there, sell products, make a huge amount of profit, grow your business. And generally, the people at the top took a huge chunk of that cake, and the people, if you like, doing the work, took a much smaller piece. Today, it's massively different. Ethics, I think, are one of the biggest things in business today. It started with CSR policies some years ago, that you have to be seen as a business to care for your people, for your team, for your suppliers and your partners, and the environment around you. So I believe that the ethics of how you behave as a person are massively important. It feeds throughout the whole business. It feeds throughout your team. And like us, we have a brand, Microfresh. We want everybody, when they see that brand name, to think of the culture and ethics of Microfresh as a transparent, open, proud business. We're proud of what we do, and that reaches all the touch points with all our partners. And culture, of course, again, is massive. These days, a lot of companies interview for culture, hire for skills. We have in our business, we have a culture internationally, by the way. We have offices in 13 countries. Of openness, transparency, and honesty and pride. So again, I think they're hugely important, and they feed through to not just your team in the office, but your suppliers, your partners, and your customers.
So that's a big challenge, creating an open and transparent and inclusive culture across 30 different countries and offices. How have you done that at Microsoft, and what's your role as CEO?
Wow, a couple of corrections. 13, not 30.
Okay, well, 13 is still a lot. So,
and Microfresh, not Microsoft.
Did I call you Microsoft?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Sorry, I was just scaling you even more. Microfresh. I apologize.
That's all right. No worries. Yeah, I mean, how we do it is, maybe I'm a little bit old-fashioned, but I believe I've always been brought up in a culture where people get on planes and go and meet people and spend time and build relationships. And again, it's something that I've learned through business is the people around you have to have the same values. So whether it's in Pakistan or China or the US, we generally sit together, we talk together, we've eaten and drunk together, we've done business together, and felt that bond home, that camaraderie between us, to know that when we do business, we're not having to look over our shoulder. And of course, you have legal protection, but generally, if that should go in a draw. The contract that you have with your overseas partners should go in a draw, because you know that your values are the same. When you pick up the phone, you know that no one's trying to be clever and be smart, and you've got honesty between you. So to answer your questions, I've done a lot of traveling. Been to a lot of countries, spent a lot of time with a lot of people, drank some funny things, ate some funny things, but built that culture internationally.
That's great, and it's worked for you. But of course, you've had challenges, I'm sure, in your career. And maybe you can share what was one of the challenges that you faced at the start of your management and leadership career, and how did you overcome it?
Wow, it's another big question, probably for another program entirely. I think I came from almost like a corporate background. I used to work for Zeneca, or a division of Zeneca, the leather finishes division. And when I started my business, I got some really good pointers from a very good friend of mine, David Hampson. I'll name check him. People in the footwear industry will know him. But he helped me to change my way of thinking, to act like a business owner, and also to be proud of my culture. And when I say culture, I'm not talking about color or ethnics. I'm talking about the person that I am. I'm quite laid back. Sometimes in business, you're taught that's not the right way to be. I'm quite forgiving, I'm quite open, and I'm quite trusting. And David taught me that you can be all those things and be a business leader. You don't need to be a hard-nosed, difficult person to deal with. So I hope that answers your question again.
Well, that's amazing. And so you've built your business by being your authentic self, right? Which is
absolutely
not changing who you are to be successful. And that is a great lesson and a great piece of advice for all of our listeners. And probably a major challenge that people face today. But is there another challenge that you think people starting out on their careers face today that is new, that maybe you've had to face in the last few years, and some advice you could give to overcome that?
Yeah, wow, yeah. Advice, yeah, that's a big word for me to give. I've made some horrendous mistakes. And any entrepreneur, true entrepreneur, would tell you the same. If they haven't made a mistake, they're not a real entrepreneur. Things have changed massively. And some things that I've learned are to do things quicker, but also to take time. You know, have a breather, think. And also, when you're building your team, I believe that something that I've been told over the last 4 or 5 years is get smart people around you. Mm-hmm. I used to work for Echo, the Danish shoe company, and the owner of Echo, a guy called Carl Toosby, massive exemplary leader. He employed me to do a job. I'd come from a corporate environment, and his words were, if I had to tell you what to do, I wouldn't have employed you. So in his words, I was smarter than him. And you cannot say that. I think the problem I made was I didn't get those people in sooner. So I'd say to anybody starting out today or growing a business is, at the early stages, get smart people in to do stuff that you're not good at. Recognize what you're good at and recognize what you're rubbish at. I can do chemistry and people, and the rest of it, as people that know me will know I'm rubbish at. Apart from smiling.
Well, that's also great advice, which, you know, that surround yourself with people who are smarter than you, and very important, build on to that, which you said is that do the things that you're not less good at, right? So surround yourself with people with complementary skills. Now that's interesting, because that gets to my next question, which is a little bit about diversity. Obviously, if you surround yourself with people who are just like you, you have groupthink. If you surround yourself with diverse people, you get more diversity, better decisions. Now, we still have some challenges on that front. Obviously, we have challenges still with the gender pay gap. Results published yesterday show we're still around just under a 10% gap, and about 40% of organizations that report have gone backwards. And we still have challenges to have more entrepreneurs like you who are, for example, Black, right? Yeah. So there are ethnicity challenges. What do you think we need to do as managers and leaders to make some more swifter progress on both of those things, for women and for ethnic minorities?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. When it comes to diversity and inclusion, I do have a point which sometimes is not that popular. I do have an opinion, should I say, that your business should look like your surroundings. So diversity doesn't mean just including people and ticking boxes, for argument's sake. If you're based in the Outer Hebrides, then your workforce is not going to look like us in the centre of Leicester. And that's just a fact. So that's one thing I would always say. Look around your company, and if it doesn't look like your surroundings, maybe you may be doing something wrong. But the crucial fact, Anne, is that you're probably missing out. It's no secret that people tend to hire people that look and act like themselves, and that's just a human trait. It doesn't incite that you're racist. But in America, they had the Rooney Rule, where I think it was in baseball, where they generally said, look, for each interview for a coach in baseball, interview at least one person that is black, for argument's sake. And that gave a natural progression to ethnic minorities coming through in baseball management. So that's the two things I would say is, if you are in a city, typically Leicester, London, Birmingham, Manchester, and your company doesn't look like your surroundings, think about when you're interviewing to say, let's just get at least one person that looks a bit different, and they may open your eyes. And of course, if you do employ them, sometimes they bring different values and different angles of looking at things that are more progressive than what you've probably got.
Yeah, and how do you make sure that when you bring those diverse people in, that they don't just get hired, but progress and get opportunities to, promotions, and what are some of the tips there?
Yeah, the tips I would say is, again, once they're hired, look at them on merit. Now, they may have a completely different way of doing things, and that may be to do with upbringing. We've all been brought up in different homes, different socioeconomic backgrounds. So I may have I come from, my mum was, my parents were immigrants from Jamaica. My dad went back. My mum had 5 kids. So she raised 5 kids as a single parent. She's still around the corner telling me to come and fetch some milk. But that's a different background to probably somebody that went to Eton. So if I have a CEO that's come from Eton, they will have different ways of looking at things. And I think the key is to appreciate that people are different and they can work together for the better good for the whole company. So just be wary that they can bring different values, and a different opinion doesn't mean that it's wrong.
Yeah, I think that is such great advice. Well, one of the things that comes up when we look to address discrimination or lack of diversity in the workforce is the different roles that organizations or individuals play. So maybe you can say, what do you think is the role the CEO should play? Maybe touch on what do you think the role of the organization is, and perhaps government.
So what was the first bit of the question? I missed the first bit.
You as CEO, what's your role in helping to ensure, for example, that Microfresh and your various communities are as diverse as possible? And then what do you think the role of the organization is in ensuring that's the case, and maybe some of your employees? So what are the different roles that people play?
Sure. I think there's some things in a business, and of course it depends on the size of the business. If there's one person, then it's a little different. But my opinion is that the role of the CEO is quite specific. And the first role, I believe, is to drive the culture. The culture comes from you. And that culture can mean, in the case of our business, honesty and transparency throughout the whole business. That culture also is about encouraging people to be the best version of themselves. So again, that they can actually, they are smarter than you, and they know they're smarter than you. They're comfortable telling you that you're wrong. I've just been told off this morning. I walked in the office, said hello, and got told off by our logistics manager because she'd lost count on an order she was putting together. And I think that's the unique role of the CEO, to drive the culture. Company cultures are different across borders. Some have a dictatorial type culture, but I think that's the role of the CEO. I think the role
So wait, what did you do when she told you off?
I shrunk up the stairs and, with that little face, like, quick, I'm in trouble. It's been with us not even 2 months. So for me, that was
good for you. Good for her.
Yeah, it was a little bit of pride that
that she felt comfortable doing that, right?
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. That's right. And I think the role for the company is, again, so that people feed off each other, feeling that, again, and I can only talk about Microfresh in this case, that they feel comfortable in a meeting being openness and transparency. I mean, I think I've said transparency probably 15 times already, but in meetings that we can disagree and put points forward without being personal, because everybody realizes it's for the good of the company.
I think that's a great way of phrasing it. And, that's such a key point of inclusion. Doesn't mean everybody has to have the same opinion, but
right.
you can disagree without it becoming personal and still respecting people's differences, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And then that's the role of the business, that we all have that common goal to grow together. For government, I think that's a tricky one, because government traditionally are not very good at business. We have the wonderful Help to Grow scheme, which I think we're going to talk about shortly, which is the government's foray into actually training SME owners, which I think is a fantastic scheme, by the way. But the government, if they can appear to be heavy-handed if they get too involved in business, because at the end of the day, we're business owners. The reason we own businesses is probably because we're unemployable anywhere else, and we've got our own opinions and we want to drive our own culture.
Well, tell us from your perspective as a small business owner that went on a management program. What is for you the great thing about the Help to Grow scheme, where you and I are both on the advisory council, and I know that you've spoken to many small business owners around the country about the scheme.
Yeah, sure. Well, before I did the Goldman Sachs program, which the Help to Grow scheme is modeled on. And I've got no shame at all in giving you the big sales pitch that it's the best thing that happened to my business. So before the Goldman Sachs program, I was a business owner. I was playing at it. Let's be real. I'm being real. Ticking over. I earned a decent salary, and it was kind of okay, and everybody got paid. When I did the Goldman's program, it made me realize that we had a serious business with serious potential. And that was over 7 years ago. And it made me realize, as well as a leader, what I needed to do to take us to the next level. So the fact we're now a global brand for freshness, you can see our name in most retail stores in John Lewis and next as examples, that is a direct result of the Goldman Sachs program. The Help to Grow, sorry.
Yes, so I was going to say, and the Help to Grow scheme is about getting business owners to that next level, right?
That's right, yeah. And, the Help to Grow scheme is modelled on the Goldman's program. It's modular, so there's, I think, 7 or 8 modules over a few weeks. I would encourage everybody that's an SME owner or a business owner, that day that you take out of your business, probably once a fortnight, it's absolutely worth it. And an example that I use, or case studies that I use, is, no footballer goes to their manager and says, I don't need to train because I'm good enough. They train every day, they train harder, they get better, and I won't name names because people know who I support, and then half of you will turn off. But that's a characteristic in football, and in everyday life, every sports person does it. Every business person does it, every manager. When it comes to CEOs, we generally don't. And that is our chance to be the best footballer in the world, at the best version of ourselves. That's the Help to Grow scheme. And it takes you out of your environment, 1 day a fortnight roughly, and you're mixing with other business owners with similar issues, similar growth aspirations, and it takes you to the next level.
Well, that's a great analogy. I really like that. I would say the same for managers, right? Like, you aren't born a great manager, but you can become one if you work at it. And that's certainly what we believe in CMI, is that you can take those accidental managers and turn them into well-trained, capable leaders that can get really good results no matter what their level. But I love that analogy. And so tell us, go on, Byron, who do you support?
I'm a Chelsea fan.
Well, okay then. Well, then you will not have liked last weekend because I'm a Brentford supporter. Just saying.
Is that the time?
Anyway, moving on.
Right,
so technology, obviously, we're using technology now. Technology is rapidly evolving. Do you think technology can help us and help companies to become more inclusive? Any examples that come to your mind?
Yeah, wow, technology. Technology. Although I don't look old enough, hopefully you guys would say, but I remember when everything was done on paper,
Yeah.
and it seems 200, 300 years ago. So where we are today with technology to 25 years ago, it's amazing. I mean, CRM systems save a huge amount of time. Mobile phones, what we're doing now, video conferencing,
Mm-hmm.
Teams as they call it, Teams and Zoom, and I think it means that some people who have different skill sets can now be part of the table, be part of have skin in the game.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I have a mild version of ADHD when I was a kid, which people that know me will say, we know Byron, he's so scatty, which is why I employ people better than me at strategy and more stable things. So it's meant that someone like myself could become to be the business person that I am today. Technology's helped massively because I can't write things down that are more than 4 lines. My brain goes off somewhere else. And sometimes that's a characteristic of a certain race or culture. So I think technology has meant that it's much easier, should I say, to become the best version of yourself. And also because it's kind of put this horizontal sort of scope around the world, it means that it's very easy to get in with different cultures involved. So generally, I mean, what I'm trying to say is a 35-year-old in the UK has probably more in common with a 35-year-old in Bulgaria than a 50-year-old in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
Because of
Yeah, well, digital natives are very important, right?
That's right.
But I want to pick up on something that you mentioned. You shared that you were diagnosed with ADHD, which is a type of neurodiversity. So for our 75th anniversary, we're looking at the impact of diversity across all marginalized groups: gender, ethnicity, LGBTQ, age, socioeconomic background, and disability. And one of the things that came up is a lot of leaders are not comfortable disclosing that they might have had or have a disability. But you just shared it. I know it's part of your openness and transparency, but do you think leaders need to be more of that, sharing more about some of the things that maybe we can't see about them?
Yeah, I think we should be more open. I mean, just to clarify, I wasn't diagnosed with ADHD, but my headmistress still says that she said you were the kid in school that just couldn't concentrate, which is why we pushed you into chemistry.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but I think it's about being proud of who you are. I like rap music. I listen to there's a guy called KRS-One, and he said, just be comfortable who you are, and people, because whoever you are, people will see that. I am flawed as an individual. I mean, flawed with a W in it, not with a double O R. And my flaws there for everybody to see. So when you admit them, it just puts everybody at ease. It doesn't make you a bad person. It doesn't make you a less capable person, but it makes you who you are. And I think that's crucial.
So that's great advice, but so many managers, and we know this from CMI's research in this, just don't feel comfortable. They worry about how do they talk to somebody who, if maybe they're a white middle-aged man and they want to understand more about and understand more about what the lived experience is of a Black colleague or of a disabled colleague, but they're very uncomfortable. What advice would you give managers and leaders to talk with people who are very different to themselves?
Wow, these are great questions. I would say most people know who they are. I mean, obviously being Black is visible. But if to interact with other types of people, other cultures and creeds and races, I think most people are very open if you get to the skin of it. Just sit down with them, have a chat with them, have a conversation. And most people I've found, and this is worldwide, we do have a global business, they are very comfortable once you just sit down with them and relax. And quite often they say in a room, it's almost like the elephant in the room that no one wants to ask. But if you ask somebody generally one-to-one, they do open up. They say, "Oh, I have a." Well, I think, of course, the key is to be tactful, sometimes they may not be comfortable talking about it. And I would definitely say, if I had to give advice, which I'm not good at, is don't do it in a crowded room. Do it one-to-one over a coffee or a glass of wine or something, or a cake.
That's a really great piece of advice. Another great piece of advice, and obviously you've done that, and it's really helped you.
And I'll just add to that. Sorry, quickly. I'll just add to that quickly. Also, you know, we are all vulnerable as individuals. There's a vulnerable point in all of us. So, if you want to talk to somebody about what you think about what they're thinking, highlight your vulnerabilities as well, which makes you all seem human.
Yes, and I think that is great advice. We did a piece of research on what engenders trust. So how do you as a leader get people to trust you? And showing your vulnerability and admitting mistakes was very high up on that list. And that's so it's a great piece of advice. Now, another question that comes up as part of our 75th anniversary, where, as I mentioned, we're looking at many different types of diversity, because unfortunately, the management and leadership landscape in the UK is still not diverse enough. Now, there is a debate around, to what degree do you acknowledge and treat as universal the struggles of somebody who might be female or LGBTQ or Black or old or socioeconomically disadvantaged or have a disability? To what degree do you believe that you should treat those things with a universal approach versus actually treating them as specific areas and measuring and setting targets for separate areas? What's your thought on that?
My thoughts would be, my instinct would be to say, to have an individual approach. The reason is diversity encompasses many factors. The first thing generally people think about is color, is race or sex, and there are others that are not so obvious. In some cases, both. And I think if you take a broad brush approach, that can sometimes not work. So I'm going to just use an example. You know, being Black is, you're Black. You know, everybody can see that I'm Black. So whereas if you are, if you have like ADHD, it's not that obvious. So I think these should be taken separately. But at the end of the day, Anne, most people, given the opportunity and given the fact that if you encourage them to be the best version of themselves and to produce results, because at the end of the day, we're all in business. We need to pay the bills and we need to keep the wolf from the door, and say your role in this company is to do this and be comfortable when you have an issue because of your, whatever it is, your disability. I think that can work, because the main thing is to get them to the best version of themselves. And I've always done that. You know, I had a boss when I was a lot younger who just said, I'm in footwear and chemicals, that's my background, which at the time, I think I was the only Black person in the UK. And I travelled to places like Clark's in Somerset and K-Shoes in Kendal and places where there wasn't any diversity, but he just taught me to keep my head up high and be good at my job. And that seemed to wow through, and smile a lot.
Yeah, well, you do all of those things, and that's a great story. And, you know, and it obviously worked. And so that individual approach and being respectful, right?
Yeah.
And maybe listening. What you've said is have a conversation with people one-on-one, get to know them as a person.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how, and do you think that we should get, but a lot, you know, we're having this discussion, data. So knowing, for example, what percentage of your workforce is ethnically diverse or is disabled or is female or all three of those things, doing that measurement, collecting that data. How important do you think that is for organizations and indeed, you know, organizations large and small and indeed countries to make progress? How important do you think that measurement is?
I think it's important for large companies. When I say large, I would say over 500 employees, because it's quite clear at that level, if everybody looks and sounds the same, A, you might be missing out on the best people, and B, there may be an issue to do with not hiring people that don't look like you. I think at that level, it's quite crucial that you do have data to say that a percentage out of our workforce, this much is is black or female, or of our managers or directors, which I think is more crucial, because it's very easy. I mean, my background is in footwear, and typically in footwear, you had male managers in shoe factories. You had a couple of female managers, and the workforce, especially in what's called the closing room, was mainly all women. So I think at that level, it's crucial to have that data. At smaller companies, I think it's kind of needs to be organic, where the CEO or the managers look around and say, do we look like the environment that we're in? And if we don't, then there has to be an economic argument, a financial argument, otherwise it won't work. And if we don't look like the environment we're in, we are missing out and probably not as profitable or as good or as marketable as we could be.
Yeah, and well, there's a lot of evidence that says diversity delivers better results, right? And so you're absolutely right. And diverse teams take better decisions and make fewer mistakes than non-diverse teams. So there is an absolutely compelling business case for doing exactly as you say. And I think it's interesting that it's interesting to me that we are measuring the gender pay gap. It is glacial in closing. We have advocated, for example, measuring the ethnicity pay gap in the same way, and the government has shied away from that. But what I think is what gets measured gets managed, and what gets managed usually gets done. But interestingly, only if you have a plan to tackle it, right? And a lot of people, do you agree with this, that there are some companies that are more or less just paying lip service to some of these ideas, but not really putting action plans in place?
Oh, yes, there are. The last thing I would do on an international forum like this is name them. But of course there are. I mean, the US has its problems, but generally things like this are open on the table and people can see them. Whereas over here in the UK, we have a very different history, a very different culture. It's something I've found from spending a lot of time in the US, is that we speak the same language, and sometimes that's about it. But over here, we have a class system. We have a culture of, let's just say, jobs for the boys. And of course, I think some companies do pay lip service. And I think it's probably the role of, I guess, government to eyeball those boardrooms face to face and say, we need to see some results. We need to see some action. And we need to see some reasons why you don't look like the environment that you're in. Otherwise, it's not good for you as a business. It's not good for us as a country. And it's not good for spreading the wealth around the economy, not just around a few people. I think that's
you make it sound so simple. I mean, I do agree with you. I think that we do need to measure those things, and it should be the role of government to ask exactly those questions that you're saying. But of course, one of the things we've seen in COVID is some of those groups that we have been talking about. So women, people from ethnic minorities, and poorer people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds have been harder hit by COVID. And therefore, you could argue that's even more important as we, build back better, that we pay attention to these things. Do you agree with that?
I do, actually. I do. And I mean, what we don't have over here, and I'm not trying to sound like a spokesman for the US Tourist Board, but we don't have mandates. Mm-hmm. So in the US, if you supply the government with anything, they look at your supplier base and say around 20% of your supply spend, and we're talking big numbers here, needs to be with minority businesses. So therefore, there is a culture of people looking for good, diverse suppliers. And over here, to answer your question about COVID, yeah, those people have been disproportionately hit by the COVID pandemic. And unless there's affirmative action, it won't happen. And I think in this country, we're afraid to do affirmative action. We're afraid to say it because of all the labels that sometimes go around it, like xenophobia and racism. But I do think it's not fair that some people, especially lower socioeconomic groups, I've seen that. I was brought up in that environment, have been massively disproportionately hit, and the government needs to do something about it.
Yeah, and so you're saying that that is the role of government, and it has to be a very important point about how we build back better, and indeed how we level up, and all those other lovely slogans. I think you're absolutely right with that. Um, but getting a little bit more personal, what do you think that you've learned about your leadership style from the pandemic?
That's another great question. The first few months were difficult, very difficult. What have I learned about my leadership style? I've learned that it's not paternal. It's that I've learned that when COVID happened, my first instinct was make sure the team's safe, make sure they're not worrying, make sure they're not worrying for their jobs, make sure they're worrying for their future. So the first thing we did was had a meeting with everybody and said nobody's going to be furloughed, nobody's going to be fired, nobody's going to be made redundant. Of course, that meant that the role of running the business fell disproportionately on myself and my other director at the time. So we were suddenly working 20-hour days. And I realized that I do have a natural paternal instinct to look after everybody, which can be good, but in some cases it went a bit too far. And I think what I've learned about my leadership style is to build a team that can run the business without me. Mm-hmm. Almost make myself redundant to say, guys, it's your business. I started it and I'm leading it, but it's your business. And that was a massive change over the last, especially the first 12 months. And that's how we've come back out of the pandemic. So now we have a structure where there's a team running the business with autonomy, with the ability to tell me to get out my office and to, stop interrupting them.
Like the logistics lady, right?
That's right.
Leave me alone. I'm filling my order.
That's right. That's right. And they actually run it. They feel like it's their business, and I'm sort of like some figurehead that sits somewhere else.
Oh, that's a great learning, but it's also wonderful that you looked after everybody, and well-being is the number one concern that CMI's research shows that that's the thing that most managers and leaders have on their minds is well-being for their teams and themselves, and for all of their stakeholders, right? Because we've all been hit by this, right?
As anybody probably knows, the people at the back of the queue when it came to the furlough scheme and all the handouts were company directors. Mm-hmm. who got zero. But that made me realize that kind of does go with the job. You are looking after everybody, and of course in turn they look after you as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And what do you think that society has learned from COVID? Do you think there are any lessons for us as a society?
Yes, I do. I think society's learned that. I think society's almost done a rewind to values. Because before COVID, it seemed a very different world. The roads were full, the trains were full, the planes were full. People, looking back, were very uptight. Things that mattered, people were a lot less healthy pre-COVID, I'm guessing. I mean, I don't have any data to back this up. It's just what I see. And I think with lockdown and furloughing and people working from home, people have realized that I don't want that 3-hour commute every day. I can do my job from home. I want to see my kids growing up. I want to keep my heart rate down. I want to keep my fitness levels up. I want to, take the dog for a walk, and I can do the job around that. And I think that's a real valuable lesson that a lot of people have learned, that of course you work for a company and you want to make profits and you want to grow and progress through that business. But there are other values that were kind of lost that have now come back, and they're here to stay, I think, and they're here to stay. So when we interact with our team, we take all those values and the new normal, if you like, that people have a much more rounded view of their lives, of not just getting into the office for 8 and leaving at 6 and head down and snarling through the traffic, that there's a bigger picture to life.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I, like you, really hope that recognition about fitting your work around your life rather than your life around your work stays with us, and that enlightened employers like yourself will allow people to carry on with those values, right, of seeing their kids growing up and walking the dog, because actually people are more productive when they can do that, right? So it makes perfect business sense, right?
Yeah, it does. And now you find if someone's in the office but they're worried about who's walking the dog, or if the kids are getting home on time, they're not as productive.
Yeah.
So
That's very true.
which I'm totally happy with. As I say, I'm naturally paternal as a leader anyway.
Yeah. No, I think that that's a really good insight, and I agree with you. Right. So sponsorship. You've mentioned somebody that must have been a sponsor for you earlier in our conversation. The guy that told you just, be proud and hold your head up high and do your job well. But what role has sponsorship played for you in your career? And do you sponsor people?
Yes, I do. I mean, my background, as I've mentioned before, is a single parent family, 5 kids on a council estate, black kid as well, black boy, which is one of the sort of most vulnerable groups. So I spend time with a local school here for excluded kids, and I help to encourage them, especially black boys, to be the best version of themselves. And of course, I do have some people in business that I'm helping again to be the best version of themselves, and saying, listen, I'm at the end of the phone, almost in a mentor role, but also to encourage them. One of the biggest things that I think that this country misses out on is we are an island, and we act like an island, and we also act like there's not a big world out there. So to encourage, I spend time encouraging companies, SMEs especially, to go international. It's not that scary. You need to go and embrace yourself in culture, but do it. I can do it, and I still do it now. We're just open in Spain, Mexico, Colombia. And
Wow.
yeah. So I that's my form of sponsorship, where I talk to SME owners and say, there's a big world out there. Don't be restricted by the UK or even just Europe. Get out there and let's make British products and brands the best it can be.
Well, that's great. And what about you? That when you were that black boy on the council estate, did you have a sponsor? What gave you your ambition to do all the fabulous things you've done?
Well, I had 2 who were both, I had a chemistry teacher who said, you're an annoying little, I won't say the word on international social media, but you can do chemistry. And if you want to get off this estate, do your chemistry. If you want to carry on making all the other kids laugh and being that fun kid in school, you'll be stuck on this estate for the rest of your life. And
So he saw your talent.
that was the trigger, yeah. She still, when I got my results, she just said, I don't know how you've done it, but you've got like the top mark, but because you always look like you're somewhere else. But that's your incentive, Byron, to get off this council estate, do your chemistry, and you can do lots of things.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. So she inspired you to
She did, in her own way. She was actually sat on the desk with a cigarette at the time. I know this is a long time ago. But yeah, and her attitude was, it doesn't affect me, it affects you. So it's your choice.
That's great, and obviously, it's great that she encouraged you, and here you are today. So that sponsorship, or that person believing in you and saying, "Go make something of yourself." Now you're that person telling others the same thing.
That's right.
Yeah, which is paying it forward, which of course is incredibly important. Is there any leader that particularly inspires you today, and could you share that if you have one?
I do. She always tells me off for this. There's a lady that a lot of you probably won't know. Michelle Palmer, her name is. She runs a company called Canary Wharf and City. And Michelle's a black girl. And when my business was tiny, well before the Goldman Sachs program, I was invited to the House of Commons. And I went down completely green and fresh out of the box. And I saw Michelle speaking. And I thought, wow, she's speaking at the House of Commons, and she's my age, and she's a black girl. And I thought, wow, anything's possible. So Michelle is, she won't thank me for this because she's always very shy and retiring. But if you get a chance, look up Canary Wharf and City, Michelle Palmer. She's been a major inspiration for me.
That's wonderful. Well, we'll definitely look her up. Because we're always looking for inspirational leaders, and especially inspirational women, and indeed inspirational Black women. That's amazing. So that's a great story. Okay, another big question here, Byron, before we open it up for questions. And if you have a question for Byron, we're going to be taking them in just a moment. But first, what does a better, fairer society look like for you?
Wow. A better, fairer society. That is a huge question. For me, a better, fairer society is one where there's a lot more emphasis on merit, not who you know. And there are some great people. I remember somebody saying to me that the touchscreen glass was invented in the 60s, but the person that invented it didn't have any connections. And I think that's if you're born into, as I say, council estate, you don't have high level business connections, and that's a major drawback. So for me, a better, fair society, which social media can do it can play its part, is that senior people, leaders, business leaders, probably people like ourselves and big CEOs and dignitaries and famous people, when they see younger, hungry people looking at their social media or trying to connect with them, is to give them a chance. Don't just think, I don't need them, then they're nothing, I don't need them, I'm a multimillionaire. To me, that's the fairest society, that everybody or good people have access to those that hold the power.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that we help each other up, right? And we help each other to be the best we can be.
Yeah.
I think that's a great vision. And is there one, if you were going to sum up your best words of wisdom for our listeners for today, what would they be? What's Byron's take?
I would say be yourself, and then caveat that with be the best version of yourself, and hopefully things will shine through. Things will.
That's amazing.
Somebody somewhere will recognize that and take you to the next level.
That is a great place to end this discussion, but we've got lots of questions. Thank you for that. Our first one is from Laura. She says, what do you think are the most important things to consider when building an organizational culture in a new startup business?
Okay, the most important things I believe are to encourage people to jump in with both feet. I think that's business in itself. I mean, we have a global business. I've jumped in with both feet. I've not tiptoed around. But I think for people that are coming into your business, especially in a startup, they need to feel comfortable putting their own stamp on different areas. I'm going to use an example, marketing. So if you take on a new marketing person, maybe a graduate, say to them, almost like I said before, you're the marketing person because I don't know anything about it. So put your own stamp on it. Listen, if it doesn't work, that's fine. Try something else. So I think that's one of the main things that you need to consider, that people coming into your business will be nervous, especially if you're a startup, it's a new business, and also to share your journey with them. Share where you're going to be in 18 months' time. And I don't mean gross profit, net profit, and all that other stuff. I mean where they can be, where you can be as a business, and where your brand can be.
Yeah, that's great. So yeah, give them a development path, right? So share the what's in it for them, which I think is really important in startups. Great, thank you. The next question is from Omar. If I was applying for a management position in your organization, what skills and behaviors would you look for?
I like that. That's one of my principles. If you don't ask, you don't want. I would be looking for someone that takes control, that takes ownership, somebody that will eyeball me and say, Byron, I am skilled in this area. I will do it. I'll do it in my own way with your guidance or with your pointers, but you won't have to manage me. You won't have to, not check up is the wrong word. Just leave me to deliver results. That's what I'm looking for. Someone that can be autonomous, and I would give them autonomy. And that's something that I had in Echo. So when I went to Echo as a global finishing expert, Carl Toosby said, it's yours. If that means you have to travel around the world 10 times, I don't care. Just deliver me the results.
Great. Sounds like, so Omar, that's very clear. So you can take that away and see if that's a good match for the way you like to do things. Our next question is from Steve. If you could give your younger self one piece of advice, what would it be?
Love that. start younger. Which I know sounds a bit obvious, but I would have started. Okay, my business is topical; it's antimicrobial. And now we've got COVID. But I would have done what I am doing now 10 years ago. But at the time, I was in a business. I was working for a company that I wasn't sure that I fitted in. Nothing to do with color or race or anything. And I should have jumped. I should have jumped sooner. So have more belief in yourself. That's what I would say to my younger self.
Great. How old were you when you started Microfresh?
I was 36.
Okay.
30. Yeah. Started the business. Yeah. 36.
Okay. So you would have started at 26.
Yeah, that's right.
There you go. Great. The next question is from Dennis. I think celebrating the success of teams and individuals is critical for morale and mental health. I'm interested to hear how you celebrate your team's achievements.
Right. Okay. So what we do is we have a 3-year strategy. Mm-hmm. And I think the crucial thing is to break that down into, it's a book I read by Kevin Gaskell. If you get it, it's called Inspired Leadership. Kevin Gaskell is the author. He's a fantastic guy. And he spoke about breaking those targets down into 50-day chunks. And that means that roughly once every month and a half, everybody knows where they stand. So we do little things. We do little pizza days, the normal kind of stuff. But also the little things matter. You know, right when you're copied onto an email, you write back individually to that person and say, great email. The little things really do matter. Financial things, I mean, you know, there's lots of evidence that says financial incentives are not as inspiring as we all think they are. So I think the little things matter, and also making people feel that they're on a career path. So yeah, that's what we do.
Yeah. And you know, you're right. Giving people praise, like saying great email or great job, it's free.
It's free.
It's like the most underutilized management tool, right? Just saying right. Thank you, great email, right?
Even a little fist bump in the office, you'd be amazed. Mm-hmm. You'd be amazed how far those things go.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And that, and allowing people to fit their work around their lives, and giving them the autonomy you were talking about, and giving them a career path. Those are all more important than pay, actually, for the majority of people. Okay, we've got a question here from Rosa. We're an SME and we're working really hard to improve our employee diversity, but are really struggling to attract candidates from diverse backgrounds. What advice do you have to help us stand out from the crowd and attract a more diverse workforce?
Oh, Anne, I lost your connection then.
Oh, so it's a question from Rosa. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah, I got the question though.
Okay.
So I can answer it. I suppose I'm trying to veer off saying, don't feel obliged that you have to have a certain, attract a certain type of person to your workforce. But if you want to reach those people, the obvious answer is look at what image your company portrays. And that can be in everything you do. In social media especially is a big one. But also how people talk about your business. Think about that. And sometimes it means advertising in different parts of the city or town where you are. It means advertising in certain schools, certain universities. But I think the main thing is if you're not attracting those candidates, think about how your business is portrayed on your website, typically on your social, because people do check these things out when they're looking for work, you know, when they're looking for interviews. And if it doesn't look attractive, then they generally can be scared off. So that's something to think about. We put a lot of stuff out about our team, so people can look at our business on LinkedIn in generally and see that we are just a real melting pot of different cultures and ages and you know, levels and graduates and school leavers. And that means that when we advertise, people say, this is a company I want to be part of because I feel I can be part of that business and I'm not going to feel isolated. So yeah, I think the answer is think about how your company's portrayed.
Yeah, and then your other point, go to go to places where you will find more diverse people and recruit them from those places. That's the other thing that you said, which is absolutely a critical point for Rosa. Yeah. So both great pieces of advice. So another question here from Gavin. Considering diversity and different views, do organizations need to skill their teams into disagreeing constructively to achieve better outcomes? Well, you talked about that earlier. What do you think?
Yes. And I said it almost like a comment, but Gavin, you're right. It's not easy. And again, that does come from the CEO. It's a culture that has to be driven from the top so that you let people disagree with you in a meeting and you don't shut them down. And you actually admit that they've got a better idea than you. And you can even say, the old phrase, okay, let's agree to disagree, but you're in charge of finance. I'm not. So therefore we'll do it your way. It can be a slow burner to get to that stage, but also you can just get people in a room and say, look, guys, as part of the success in our business, one of the things that's crucial is that we can actually disagree and not take it personally. And again, it's not a plug, but Kevin Gaskell's book does talk about that in a very easy to read chapter.
Well, it's a very important thing. One of the big roles of a CEO is to manage conflict. And one of the best ways of managing conflict is to encourage constructive disagreement with your views, right?
Yeah.
And that means, just as you said, admitting when somebody else has a better idea, admitting when you got it wrong, right?
Yeah.
Right? And role modeling how to constructively disagree. And whether you're the CEO or, because maybe Gavin isn't the CEO, but maybe he leads a team. And as team leader, he could do those things. He could give the members of his team the option and the right to disagree with him and demonstrate through how he handles that it's safe, it's okay to do.
That's right. And it can become destructive when it's just a disagreement. So again, a question I always say is, what's the solution? Rather than just letting people just disagree and say, I think that's rubbish, or I don't agree, or whatever. Say, okay, what's the solution? And then that encourages people to think constructively.
Yeah, that's a great point. Okay, our last question comes from Jules. Do you think the pandemic has made organizations think more proactively about contingency planning? Obviously, we never saw this coming, but should organizations be spending more time thinking about the future and the impact of global events like COVID was or is?
That's a long question, Jules. Do we think the pandemic made it? My personal view is it did, but I don't think it does anymore. I think people have almost moved on very quickly. Of course, we still have COVID as around, and we still have absences due to positive testing. But my gut feeling, being very straight, is that most companies feel it's kind of a bit of the thing of the past, and the major panic is over, which of course is the awful numbers that we saw with hospitalizations and deaths. I think organizations should spend time thinking about the future. And again, I'm going to do a shameless plug for Help to Grow, because one of the things I did on the program I did, and it's on Help to Grow, is about risk management and risk assessment. And one of those things are things like acts of God, government intervention, authoritarian changes, things that are out of your control that can affect your business, and what's your contingency. So again, it is a shameless plug, but I would say jump on the Help to Grow, and it'll help to put all that into context and make your business more future-proof. Not trying to sound like a smart behind, but we actually had a risk strategy, and it did say a pandemic. At the time, it was Ebola. So, and that was as a result of doing a program similar to Help to Grow that we built.
Right. Which is again another great plug for that. And I know Rosa and others have been from SMEs, and so if you're not the CEO, Rosa, tell your CEO to go on Help to Grow, and that'll maybe help them get a more diverse workforce. Byron, it's been an absolute inspiration chatting with you today. I know that from the number and breadth of the questions, our audience has really enjoyed it as well. You're an inspiration. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. And thank you for all you do for Help to Grow and for CMI and for your employees and for your business. And delighted to have you with us. And for our listeners, if you have enjoyed today's broadcast and you are not a CMI member or friend of CMI, find out how you can join us in the chat. Thank you. Take care.
And thank you for inviting me, Anne. Thank you, everybody. Take care. Have a great day.